Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. Today we've got what is arguably, well, it's the most creative job title I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never, ever interviewed anybody or spoken to anybody that can be considered an empathy creation specialist. So congratulations on that, Simon. That's a very thought-provoking title. And this is actually a very thought-provoking session. So Simon's going to be talking more around sort of business impact of the global pandemic and what we can learn from that process and how we can move forwards. As always, if you want to share contact details in the chat, please do so. And likewise, if you want to ask questions, you can ask them in the chat, or you can interrupt Simon directly as well. So this is your session. If you've got those questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Simon, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm just going to start the presentation, share off and go from there. So welcome everybody, that's worked. Can everybody see the screen and see the presentation, get over the first bit of it?
Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, Ollie. As I say, there's probably about, well, depends how we go, there's probably 30 minutes of presentation sat in here. I've got a big sticker saying slow, by the way. I've got quite a thick accent and I'm a very fast talker. So if even an interruption is, can you slow down a bit, please feel free to. I do want people to interrupt and ask questions as we go through this, though. It's a subject that I haven't got an absolute view on. I thought it'd be better to come in and talk about some of the things that are pertinent to what's happening and going on as a result of COVID, and some of the initial things we're seeing as sort of winners and losers in that environment. But these are all still things that are sort of shaping out. So I've got a view on these things and I'm going to present my views to you, but I'm not saying these are the definitive answers to it. So it'd be great to get other people's views or thoughts, or simply pause and ask questions about it as we go through as well. So if you want to, I'm guessing you can all just come off mute if you want to, and then ask a question and put yourselves back on mute. Ollie did volunteer to look at the chat box as well, and if there's anything that people are posting in there in terms of questions, he'll come back on and shout it out as a question as we go on. So does that sound all right for people? Are we ready to dip into the subject? Thank you for the invitation, by the way, Ruth, for this as well. So that's been much appreciated. So obviously, the biggest thing that's happened for most people within 2020 is what's gone on in terms of the COVID impact, which has been a global phenomenon that I'm guessing none of us have been through the like of before in terms of the actual impact. From a financial point of view, it's impacted this economy at about the same level and scale as the war, I believe it is. The other thing I saw was the big frost of, which might have been 1780. So this is a significant event. The one thing I do want to say about all of this, though, we're only talking about it within the business context, because certainly within some of the things that have been happening, there have been positives and negatives from a business point of view. Obviously, from a personal point of view, the majority of the impact is actually a bad impact for people. So I just want to frame it as that. So if we do talk about some of the upsides of it, I don't necessarily think there's an upside from COVID itself. I think there is an upside in terms of the learnings we can take from it. So we will just get into it from here. So first things first. I'm not going to talk extensively about me, by the way, because people have got better things to do. But I think in terms of framing where I'm coming from, I'm lucky in that I've worked for a number of quite unusual companies. Those companies probably now would be recognised as focused on creating outcomes, working quite collaboratively, working across a disparate number of suppliers, working within groups, being zero-based budgeting. So things that are actually would be classed as quite modern thinking. So I class myself as lucky to have had that environment. And whilst I've worked with some large companies, Kingfisher Group and people like that, I've worked within quite small teams that have had quite autonomous roles in those businesses. But fundamentally, I'm a brand and data-led marketeer. So my job has always been about affecting people's behaviour, so that in general they buy from the company I'm working for in preference to others. So I'm all around creating propositions and creating ideas and doing those types of things. And that's the role that I perform. I can suffer a little bit from sort of creating marketing precepts, which is why I call myself an empathy creation specialist for Custarian. I'm not going to talk about Custarian in this. I want to talk about some of the things that we've been asked to by Ruth on this one as well. But that's my background. So I've come through financial services, retail, run agencies, always around affecting behaviour, always to this sort of approach to being, what we really need to do is collaborate together to create outcomes, don't we? So that's my background and that's my natural thinking and inclination. So if we go to today's thought, and it is a thought, and I'm going to come back and justify this. And again, I'd like to see whether people have got views on this as to whether you think this has been going. But COVID has delivered a transformative moment at a global level. It's affected our lives at a fundamental level. And again, if we get anything that sounds as if it's political, I'm not being political about this at all. I have no political leaning or bias in this. But at the end of the day, we've been told where to work. We've been told when we can go out. We've been told when we can exercise. These are all big things. And as part of what I do from a marketing point of view, I'm always looking at what affects people's behavior. Right? And what affects people's behavior? These are some of the real fundamentals, being told how you can do things. But when we look at fundamental change, we sort of think it's the true pioneers that we're going to be the innovators, and they'll be at the edge of change. And I want to sort of challenge whether that's what's happened in this. Myself and Ollie were having a little quick pre-chat on this, and we've talked about when you look at some of these companies, the things you think are going to be very innovative might become too big to be innovative. They already might be too stuck in the ways to be innovative. And we've got examples on things like Amazon where we can talk about that. There's a view, for example, Apple hasn't delivered anything innovative since Steve Jobs left. So some of these things, well, who are the people who've done things? So I've got some of those that I'll go through to give examples of what's been going on. I think from this point of view, however we look at it, disruptive effect. When we look at what's gone on as a result of COVID, and we're lucky we've had some access to some research that talks about how people's behaviours have changed. The ones that were most flexible going into COVID have come out of it better. There's a generalisation for you. In terms of working from home, we know that most people have been through a phase or a relationship with working at home. Some people definitely can't work at home. They're just not mentally suited to it. Or they haven't got the capability to work at home. We've just done a piece of research when we've been working with people around what have been the effects of home worker and home working. And we're starting to see things that are coming out now where people are suffering welfare type issues. And there's some concerns about people purely working from home and how that's affecting them. Now, there is a view that a lot of these are related to not working from home, but the restrictions that are being applied to people working from home, and then the double whammy of homeschooling landing on top of it. So there's a bit of a confused feast going on in there, but certainly from some of the larger companies we're talking to, they are beginning to recognise welfare issues that are going on in their teams. They're also looking at how they manage people who work from home as well, and the issues they've got in managing people working from home, because it's usually a different type of person, or they need to be managed in a different way to work effectively from home. And we'll touch on some of that as we go through. But the thing that I want people to just think about is usually when something happens, the time impact of it is quite short. We will not be out of this in any meaningful sense unless Boris presents something amazing on Monday, but certainly through sort of May. And they're even telegraphing July before we get to the point of it being significant in terms. That means that the ways of working and people's attitudes will be changed at a reasonably fundamental level because it's gone on for long enough. The changes have been significant enough and people have had a chance to adapt. And when we look at some of the pragmatic reasons behind that, even things like we're coming up to an April year end for a lot of businesses. April year end for a lot of businesses when they relook at the 3-year plans and they write a budget for next year. So when we're talking to clients, they're talking about writing homeworking into their budgets. So there is a structural mechanism now that's being put into business that says this is the way it's going to be. So that's it. As we get into it, that's all the background to it. Big change, lasted for a long time, fundamental impact. Some of the stresses that are coming out of it are starting to, can we disentangle them from what's the effect of COVID versus what's the upside from talking from home? Every company we talk to will not be going back to an office-based model in whole. They're all talking about blended. Right? Every single one of them is saying we will have some blended way of working, which will support people who want to work permanently at home, will support people who want to work permanently in the office, or gravitate between the two. nobody has come up with a different view of that. All they're talking about is the scale of it and the quantum of it and what they think the issues and the acceptability of it will be.
Simon, just on that topic, are they also analysing things like role change, where they can change, roles to suit that? Because there are some roles that have always been traditionally office based and have to be. And I'm thinking more administration and things like that. The reason I'm asking the question, I spoke to one organisation that said that they were going to digitise a lot of what they did on paper to remove to mitigate the requirement for someone to have to go into the office. Are people looking at sort of transformation in terms of, roles themselves and technology and how they can swap out some of those manual processes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, we talked to and this comes back to what we've talked in here. One of the companies we've talked to are a very, very staid bank who were literally, yeah, we'll get them home, but we'll bring them back. They very quickly went, this is an opportunity, actually, not a threat. So they've properly gone paperless. They fully admitted that they weren't paperless before, even though they should have been, but they didn't need to be, so they weren't. So they've embraced technologies that have made them more paperless. They're actually looking at some quite fundamental changes. They're actually looking at not giving people grades, but giving people outcomes and salaries equated to outcomes, then just leaving them to deliver the outcome. And that's a sea change for a bank to look at in terms of what it does. So they are looking at the types of roles. They're looking at whether people should role share. They're looking at doing role splits. So you might be part administrator, part service executive. So they're taking some quite big looks at it. That tends to be driven by individuals in the companies we've talked to rather than the company. So I still think there's a bit that went on where when COVID hit, the need, which was driven by had to, not want to get people home, really pulled the sort of agitators and the people who shape business up and the digital teams to the fore, who went and delivered a load of stuff. Those that are still there are using this as an opportunity to try and keep momentum, and they are looking at those things. And I think I mentioned on the call before, the challenging the thing that says a sustainable model isn't, Zoom with email. That is not a sustainable model, and we need to explore how we use technology to support our ways of working, or we will slip back to those presenteeism ways of working. It's quite a long answer, but does that give you some indication, Ollie, as to where that was?
Yeah, that's perfect. And there's a lot of organizations that have been doing similar sort of things for a number of years that we can learn from as well. So it's not just a net new discovery exercise in terms of, having to jump into the pool for the first time, right?
Absolutely. I think, and we'll probably touch on this again, but it's worth reminding that one of the questions we ask is specifically about gig and the sort of Gen Z coming into business, and that they all will support this. There's quite an interesting one that from a maturity and development point of view, a lot of them want to work in offices with people. So again, I think and there's a lot of what you would class as the more traditional workforce who don't, because they've got good social circles. So I think, again, for people are going to have to be a little bit more nuanced, would be the word, as to how they apply these things going forwards, because it's not true that just because I'm young, I'm technologically capable. I've spoken to somebody who said they have to train them to use things like WhatsApp because they're just not very good from technology outset from a work point of view. But I wouldn't assume that because you're young, you'll want to work in this way, and because you're older, you'll be fixed in your ways. That's absolutely not what's coming out from the conversations we're having with people. You have a predisposition, and there's lots around socialization and building skills and working with people. Equally, we've spoke to some pure gig players who are just like, no, we've never been in office and we don't ever want to be in an office. Thanks very much. The question comes, how much of the heart's ripped out of cities like London and Manchester? So therefore, your ability to socialise, even if you're not in an office, starts dropping as well. There's a bit of that in it, I think, that we don't quite have a feel for at the moment, Alexa.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. The next thing, and we just use this in terms of summarising the types of things. This came out quite quickly. So when COVID started to hit and you looked at the types of companies and what they were doing, you had a sort of protector business who basically just went, don't worry, everything's going to go back to how it was before. I've got a specific example of a utility company that basically went, it's all right, we'll all be back in the office soon, and that's what we need to do. And they're sort of still hanging there, thinking that that's what they'll be able to do. No? There's the other one in the business, which is pretending it's not there, sort of frozen. So they'll just carry on doing what they were doing until something comes along and either takes them out of the business or the game. And then there's this group over the right who sort of viewed it as a massive opportunity. and have decided, look, there is a new way of doing things. We want to embrace these things. We're not saying these are all right and wrong, by the way. There are plenty of markets and verticals where people could probably just go largely back to how they were before. Heavily industrialized or heavily production related environments might be able to work like this. But the ones that went in better, and there's some research that supported this that was done by a global business that was shared, was if you were already change orientated, you're already reasonably digitally enabled, then you probably went into this better. You were less preoccupied, and I don't mean wrongly, but you just didn't see COVID as the only thing you had to focus on. You went, well, we've got to give that to that team over there. But what we now need to do is think about what else are we going to do? Because somewhere in this, there will be opportunities. And those are the ones, the galvanized businesses, that have performed best as they've gone through this type of environment. And there was some, and that startup stuff started coming out of global companies operating in China, which obviously was the first hit, fastest to recover, but then has gone around other territories. So there are these different types of businesses around, and we haven't got a view by of how many are in each of these, but it'd be interesting for you to think about for your own points and the people you work with, what are they trying to do and what sort of position do they find themselves in currently? Within the galvanized business, and we touched on it before, there was a little bit of, but was it a team? Was it a group of individuals? We were working with one business to get 600 people to work from home. And when you boiled it down, there was 3 people in the company that were working on getting those 600 people home. There was only 3 people that were doing that, the main majority of that work. And they were the transformative and the digital team who just went, right, we'll go and sort this out. Thanks very much. So there's still a lot of the company that was sort of being dragged there or did it because they had to. And that's where they were going with that. Does that all make sense? So first things first, to pay back to, what are some of the things that people want to think about? Most people would view, if anybody disagrees with this, by the way, do feel free to chuck in, but the Amazon's be one of the success stories on this. Behind the success story for Amazon has been a failure to deliver service at quite a significant level. They had to recruit 175,000 people in response to this, which takes their global workforce to 840,000, which probably knocks it around our NHS, I think. But they were doing it because they've got this absolute commitment to deliver product to you, and they couldn't. They could not deliver product. And part of that, which people like Walmart recognizes, went, yeah, because you've only got 110 warehouses, we've got 5,000. So what they did from a store point of view and went, well, we've got our product distributed out far further. We have got more product available than you've got of the types of stuff that you want. Because what Amazon started to do is they started to really try and ensure they could stock priority items. So they started shoving people out of their shopping environment. About half of what Amazon does is done through other people who are in the Amazon space. So they're independent companies operating in Amazon. So they just started shoving them out and going, no, we have to match what we've done. Walmart saw this as an opportunity. Walmart is a knock on a probably 90-year-old brand that was viewed to be, would be getting eaten by Amazon. And they've been taking market share like crazy back off Amazon because they went, yeah, but you're never more than 10 miles from a Walmart store. You can do click and collect, or we can do shuttle delivery to you because we'll get our teams that were working in the stores to go into the warehouse on the back of the stores. So this was a really interesting thing that somebody went, well, we should probably have been eaten alive by Amazon during this period, but we haven't been. We've turned the tables on them by looking at something that people thought was an issue, our big estate of warehouses and stores, and we've turned it to an advantage. And that's a really interesting thing when people think about, is there something about it? I'm sitting there with my head in my hands, but will be an advantage, because there's always this view, I think, that the larger companies and the more innovative entrants to a country are the ones that are going to do well. And in this instance, Amazon didn't. They had a big struggle and they've only just started to recover from it. I think they've glossed it over beautifully, but they're saying they were doing weird things like, if you were looking for PPE, they'd send you, their first recommendation would be a Kindle showing you how to make your own PPE, because they'd sold out of PPE. They didn't have it anywhere, couldn't get it, and they weren't delivering it. Yet people like Walmart were able to. So that's the first one. There can sometimes be strength in what's a perceived weakness within a business. And certainly don't view that some of these big ones have sailed through it magically. The view on Amazon was that this would be the thing that would define and accelerate their growth. They've done well, by the way. They have grown by 54%. but they've not done what people expected them to do. They thought this was going to go and category kill the retail in a lot of environments. And in some countries, Amazon have failed to get traction and hold. They're very low in the Nordic countries. They've been there for a while. They still can't get there because they prefer to shop more locally. So not all times things you think are things that are weaknesses may be weaknesses for you. Next one, and I think this was a really interesting one that's been accelerated. Has anybody heard, we said to a load of muted mics, of Amazon Go? So I'm going to take that. So we've got one nod from Ollie there. I can only see down to Sue, so I can see about 5 people down here. Amazon Go is a really interesting concept. You walk into a store, you take what you want off the shelves. It's like a sort of little Metro or Express type version of a supermarket, and you walk straight back out. And that's it. You don't go through a checkout. You don't do anything, right? So as long as you've got your Amazon app on your phone, they actually don't even promote that, by the way, but we're pretty sure you have to have Amazon. You go into Amazon Go and you go back out again. When this started to hit, obviously what we started to see is other companies went, well, that's great, but that costs a fortune. They've got 26 US locations. What started to spring up, and you'll see more of these, is companies went up and went, right, well, other retailers are going to want to do this type of thing, aren't they? But they're not going to want to do it where they have to pay for this massive store infrastructure. So they've got people, Treagall's one of them, that have gone back to other companies and gone, well, do you want to retrofit this? So do you want to just put a bit of AI and a camera in your store and that'll enable you to do it? Tesco are doing this currently. They've got a couple of trial stores where you can walk into a Tesco, you can take what you want and you can walk out of Tesco as long as you've got their app loaded, and it will do the same as Amazon Go. They do accept a certain amount of shrinkage on this, if everybody understands that retail term. So shrinkage is, we didn't quite charge you for everything, by the way. And they try to err on the side of under rather than overcharging. But then there's another Scandinavian country that went, well, I don't know what you're all doing. We'll just give you a barcode scanner. You can scan the barcodes as you go around. And as you walk out of the store, because it knows where your phone is, it charges you. So again, this is another example of people responding and delivering better technology that delivers a better solution for people faster and easier than some of the big players. So again, and I'm not picking on Amazon deliberately, by the way, other than I think people think Amazon's this big Goliath that gets everything right. These two examples where in pressing times, it's been wrong-footed. It's been wrong-footed by very established companies that arguably should be suffering as a result of Amazon, but aren't, who are growing as a consequence. And it's encouraged technology people to come up and deliver solutions that are a lot cheaper, as effective, and easier to implement and retrofit. So again, that point, which is change catches us all. The incumbent at some point, this refers to something we were talking about, Ola, the incumbent at some point will become literally that. They'll be the one that's going to get overtaken. And for a lot of larger companies, they've got a lot of these technology type issues lurking and layering around in them as well. So again, first movers leaves you open to agile startups. And there'll be a lot of that that's going on. Who are the companies that have stumbled during COVID? And who are the startups or more agile companies that are going to come and take market share or scale off them? Because they'll do it faster, they'll do it cheaper, and they'll do it more cost effectively.
Simon, just real quick on this point, and had the privilege to walk past the Amazon Go in San Francisco, and it is kind of a mind-blowing experience to think you just walk in, pick up and walk out. The other piece to this as well is on the shrinkage side of things. There were studies done around actually what does it mean in terms of staffing costs. Now, if you think every product you buy has got, you know, a proportion of everybody's salary inside that Tesco's, all of a sudden, you know, these guys are net up, even if they lost huge percentages of their stock, purely and simply because they weren't paying for those salaries. But also as well, they're tying this into the next level, which is that real-time delivery, you know, the sort of Nissan model in terms of making sure that stock turns up at the right time in the stores, so the stores are never over quoted. And they're also looking at doing that digitally in a way that makes much more sense and makes them much more agile. So for instance, previously it was, hey, we need, you know, another 10 crates of milk as an example. But what they're able to do now is spot what items are selling well and preempt a surge of kind of buyers for particular products as well. So again, maximizing on profits, but based on the agility of what, you know, the local community needs at that point.
Absolutely. And the other really interesting point for me on this type of stuff is if you're an SME and you're a relatively small company, this trickle down effect does work. At some point, something will drop to a level where you as an SME can get off after it. Because the reason why they've done the one which is the barcode version of it, they're going, well, all you need is to be able to pay for an app and then you can barcode it. And the company that's developed it are developing it so that anybody can, barcodes are built to universal global standards. So, in theory, you go from having to build a store to do this, to putting AI and camera kit in, to creating an app, or take an app off somebody and load your barcode inventory into it. And then you're there. You've got a contactless browse and go shopping experience that you can deliver to your customers. So these things are there, and these types of things accelerate the pace of this. So when something global happens, things accelerate really quickly. And anything with digital and ease attached to it has accelerated quickly as a result of what's been going on. Next one, I think this was a really interesting, and this is a direct response to COVID. I was born just outside Manchester, so I have a bit of a soft spot for Co-op. I used to live in an old Co-op store that had been converted into a house, by the way. But so I've got a little bit of a fondness for Co-op. But this story struck me, and it got quite a lot of play when we chucked it out into LinkedIn, because you wouldn't have expected. Co-op's had a lot of problems for a lot of time. It genuinely has. It's a cooperative by nature, and it's got some quite old management structures and processes. And there has been this view that at some point the Co-op will fall apart, get eaten alive, or disappear just because of some of those endemic or systemic problems that it has with it. So the thing about this that was quite interesting is when the pandemic started to hit, the Co-op absolutely got the reaction to it right. They empowered the digital team. They told the digital team that what they needed to do was create a marketplace. They told them they needed to make sure that they're looking after Co-op customers, but they understood that Co-op customers are part of the wider community. And what they created was a place where people could share and swap ideas, ask for help, share and sell things. So they decided straight out of the bat that was something they just needed to do. Nobody needed to ask them to do it. Nobody needed to seek permission for it. And the thing that I think what comes out for me on this is because they had something, and again, this plays into the companies that have done well, they had a strong sense of purpose, and they had a strong sense of what that purpose meant. Therefore, when they needed to react, they reacted in the right way to these things. So when they wanted to go and develop something, they didn't develop something that was just solely for them and was close to them. They developed something that would help at a community level. That's had a groundswell effect for Co-op, certainly in areas we live in terms of the goodwill and the feeling for Co-op. And they will get this benefit when it comes back to the retail. And it supports the decision they've made to keep community level smaller supermarkets and be the retailer of the community. And I think that was a really interesting one. When you look at some of the things we talked before about these sort of frozen companies, or this, they probably don't have a really strong sense of what their purpose is, or their purpose doesn't suit them reacting in this way. And Co-op's a really good example, I think, of somebody who might have thought would get wrong-footed and would get eaten alive by COVID, of responding in exactly the right way to it. They've developed this shopping app, they've digitized the journey. We've got people who've got the pure shopping app. The shopping app is much more easy to use, it's much more responsive, and they put off the back of this community environment to help people use the power of that community around the Co-op to get themselves through Co-op. And I think that provides a power of clarity that some businesses don't have. So they've either not got a strong purpose, or they've got management and cultures which don't help them work like this, and they've landed into COVID and they've basically just gone, right, we'll just stand still and wait to see what happens till we can come out of this. And when we come on to, there's another slide in a bit, this is one of the things that when companies have responded and reacted well, they've got right. They've understood what the purpose was as they went into it, and people have understood that how they need to deliver that purpose for them as well. By the way, there are clearly companies that have had very little choice in some of this. One of our clients going into this was XL, which is the exhibition event space in London. They've had very little choice, but they sat around and went, let's turn ourselves into, so they went to the government and said, is there anything we can do? And they went, well, you could become a triage hospital. So they turned themselves into Nightingale. Clearly, they've got very little they could do in terms of keeping exhibitions going, but they repurposed what they did. They went, look, we're part of the community, we're part of the community, can we do that? But there are some businesses, travel related, where you've got very little choice around this at the moment. It probably is a chance of just keeping things going. Last thing, and I think this is a little bit more esoteric, if that's the word, using big words that I hardly understand, but we shall carry on. There is an interesting edge that started to come out in some of the work we were doing with the rush to home working. We do quite a lot of work in the service arena, by the way. In the service arena, it's pretty much clearly understood between 9 and 17% of people are not capable of working from home from an emotional point of view. They just, if you were making them work at home all the time, they just can't do it. They would just not benefit. It would have repercussions to their mental health. And then there's another percentage that just can't. And when we say can't, it's as simple as, I'm in a 1-bed flat, I can't give you the data security and privacy, etc. So there is something that says, look, you know, home working does not suit all people, but there have been significant benefits that have come out of this. There were a couple of this. In terms of the initial welfare bit, if you put the first bit out of the way, which was everybody just went home and it was exciting and the sun was shining and it was brilliant for a lot of people, then you get into the sort of practicalities of working from. Most people have found the ability to spend more time with their family or their partners, or the ability to be more flexible, or the avoidance of between a 30-minute and a 1-hour travel into work has been a godsend for them, right? And they view that as being very positive. So if we look at it from a pure work point of view, in terms of productivity and in terms of you enjoying your work better, there are positive effects. As I say, it's hard to extract out of it the COVID-related effects of being told you have to stay at home, you have to be in lockdown, etc. That's the difficult bit to unzip out of it. But equally, what it's also done is given people insight into people's home lives like never before. And there's something, you know, there's the amusing ones, the BBC report where the kid comes in, manages to have the sense to realise there's a brilliant opportunity to get 2 biscuits instead of 1 and goes for it and gets away with it. But there's this whole thing about merging, because we used to have, particularly in the UK, a sort of post-industrial view of things, which is people had to come into an office, they had to be given a task, they had to deliver the task, and then they could go on when the whistle blew. And what we're now seeing, this thing goes, well, no, people have got a home life as well. They are part of a community, and that this is something that can help them. I think it's something we want to be careful about, though, because what we've done is given people the gift of time, but we've also got the ability as business owners to impose in people's lives more if we're not careful. And one of the initial views that when this happened was that people were sort of taking that time that they'd saved and were just giving it straight back to the company. They were basically just going, I'll put those hours into trolling me emails. I will book 5 Zoom calls a day and I will do all this. But I think that's a really important thing to think about, because this whole sense of us, we now understand and have humanized a lot of people within the context of work that we've not probably done before. And we're starting to see more of their lives. And we can understand how perhaps, you know, if they're going to move forward, we need to understand and take that into account. I haven't got any answers for this, by the way, but that's certainly some things that people are starting to consider now. They're going, you know, we didn't really realize. At its upper end, by the way, this is one of the reasons why some people have allowed people to come back into offices when actually there's no reason for them to keep their office. So there are, and these are somewhere people really just cannot and aren't safe if you stay at home. And again, they've been, you know, exposed in a good way to that. The challenge I think this puts for a lot of people is, how are you going to change your management and work style for these people? How are you going to understand that in a way that's not intrusive? How are you going to ensure that you work with them rather than just take your sort of presentarian Hawthorne type management techniques and slap it into home? And that is a really difficult thing for people to try and do. Certainly, we do a lot of work, as I mentioned, in contact centres. Even they're starting to struggle. And contact centres, you're one of the most heavily managed groups of people in the world. I know when you've logged on, I know when you've gone to the toilet, I know when you've taken a break, and how long it took you to make a call. And even there, they're talking about bringing people back. But I just think there's something in here around, we now actually understand people more and we understand how they work. And I think that's a really interesting area for people to try and get a grip of, because before all this happened, there was something coming which was called the gig economy, having 5 generations in the workforce, the fundamental focus that talent was the most universal resource we needed to get access to, and it was becoming more difficult, not easier. And this whole thing about gig economy turning up. And the last bit laid on this is the shift of management from managing you to tasks to managing you to outcome. And we were talking about this, Ollie, in the pre-call. It's very different to say somebody to go, you need to move those 10 boxes from there to there, versus somebody say, can you just make sure all our customers get what they want when they need it? Thanks, bye, gone. And judging them. So this outcome focus was starting to come. And I think this plays right into this area. And I think it's an area that, particularly in the UK, I'm not sure how well equipped we are to deal with this currently. And I think people should think about it. What we've seen is quite a lot of companies have tried to translate their internal ways of working to home ways of working.
Something on that point as well, the employee experience from a technology standpoint is something that's been industry wide for about 5 or 6 years. And there are a number of businesses, and you've got Microsoft Viva there as a new launch or a new experience, but Microsoft, VMware, Nextthink, all these guys, IBM, have all been interested in the employee experience based on AI and machine learning for a number of years. What does it mean to be an employee? What employees are overperforming? What employees are underperforming? What's their experience of their devices? Are they spending too much time on Zoom? What's the time they're spending on email? These are all technologies that are out there and have been out there for a number of years, and actually are starting to explode as a result of COVID, which is why Microsoft doubled down with Viva. But from your perspective, the technology, it is only half the conversation. People being productive through technology. You can have conversations that don't need technology that actually are a massive impact on your employee experience, and your manager conversation being one of them. Is there any resources out there that you've seen so far that people can go and look at that will help understand how they can manage their teams in a kind of post-COVID world?
No, generally, I think that's a gap in the marketplace to easily find it. I mean, our approach that we would go and Google search. It's why we put Microsoft Viva. I mean, I think when you look at what Microsoft did, they went, a lot of companies are Microsoft platformed, will use Teams to try and out Zooms, and then we'll layer this sort of productivity tool on top of it, which I'm not sure is the right way around of doing it. But I think, so I would say there's a dearth of things that go, you do understand, and bear in mind, we're into running workshops and doing types of things for companies. And we've tried all this. We've actually gone back to setting up a camera with a whiteboard where we put Post-it notes and explain to people what's going on. And that gets far more interaction than us using remote whiteboards and Trello and things like this. So it's an answer. If you've got any views, share them, genuinely.
Well, so to your point, don't get me started about Teams. Teams is just SharePoint layered with Skype, layered with OneNote, layered with Wiki, and it just becomes this behemoth. But none of it's new technology. It just groups it together and given it a bit of a shine. The outcome of this is that no, you're completely right. I think as well, you have to cater for people's own personas. There's always going to be the quiet person on the Zoom team call that never gets involved, that never says anything. So whatever you do as an organization has to kind of level the playing field. We used to host a call with 175 people every Monday, just a 1 hour call. And we'd get in a guest speaker, but then also somebody from the team could put their hand up and present their ideas. But we also had a bit of a round table in terms of making sure that everybody on that 175 strong team at some point through the year had to present some ideas and findings. But they didn't do it on their own. There would be a group of people that would help them come to those conclusions. But they're the sort of styles, right? They're the sort of things that you've got to include. But whiteboards are amazing at getting people talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and the physical ones, even when they can't read what's on the post, they couldn't. If they were in the room, they couldn't read what was on my post-it notes. But anyway, so that brings us to this bit, which I want to just look round. When we try to look at some of the behaviours that are probably present in companies that have done well, and these are not just our views, by the way. We've done a number of these things, and we've talked to some people about what they've seen and what they've experienced. You start talking around things having like a change ethos. So again, this is a bit, I think there's a phrase in a film, which, death and taxes, the only two certain things in life. The big thing that got missed there was change in the middle, of course. So change is a constant, it's only accelerating. And we might not want it to. And as humans behaviorally, we like to keep things safe. Keep safe means repeat the same thing again and again, by the way. That's an ingrained human behavior that's in 90% of people. Change agents have the sort of reverse mentality running on, which is we like to disrupt things every time. So change is basically, it's from a sort of managing things to enabling things to happen. And that's quite a big thing. And that's this whole thing which between task versus outcome. Can I be able to articulate what this company is trying to do and break it down into series outcomes that I want people to do? The other thing that's happened, and this used to be in technology, but it's in a lot of things, and a lot of businesses carry this at the heart of it, is the end state doesn't always have to be perfection. I'm saying doesn't always have to be, because if it's a aircraft flight, then you do want a 99.9999 recurring percent people get there safe. But don't aim for perfection, iterate quickly and learn that. And there's lots of phrases around fail fast. I prefer learn fast, to be honest, rather than fail fast. But don't be scared of getting things done. Don't be scared of doing things incrementally. And this is all about changing your perception to risk. Because one of the things I think that's hampered quite a lot of companies as they've come into COVID is they've carried that same attitude to risk, which is if we do something, it might go wrong. Therefore, what we need to do is take a really, really cautious approach to it. And in my view, that used to be because the structures have come out from a sort of industrial background where you'd be building factories or spending millions on computer systems or creating divisions of people. And it's infected the way we look at things as a sort of business culture. Mostly now, your clouded technology, it's a few people. If it goes wrong, you can back out of it, change it and do something else. So there is no real need for why you should not do things in a more agile way. Delegated authority means the ability to make decisions and not get a massive kicking for it if it goes wrong, which is overly simplistically put. That's proper delegated authority. The other version of which is you go and do it, then you get a massive kicking when it goes wrong, is not the way of delegating authority, in my view of it. And that is about giving people a sense that they own and can make decisions. And I think, again, this calls into, and we'll come round to it, what is the role of the manager or a leader in a business? Because it used to be about telling people what to do by when. And I think it's going to be increasingly about converting what the strategy is into the things they need to do, then helping them do it. Burning platform, there has never been, if you go to any .1 of a change book, it'll go, you need a burning platform. The biggest burning platform we all just had was called COVID. This was, you can either do this or you can go out of business. Right? And they went, well, I'd rather not go out of business unless you're in that stuck category. So you did something about it. I think for me, the interesting thing is how do I create those mini burning platforms? And that's how do I convert things at a level where people can understand that this is better for them to do than worse than do. Humans are driven by two behaviors, towards something and away from something. So the burning platform is the expression of the away from something. The towards something is, you know, you can work better and more effectively and take more ownership of something if I change the way in which I work with you. Purpose-driven. Purpose-driven, there's a lot talked about this, and I'm a marketeer, so I could probably go on about it too much, but I just think it's the thing that goes, people really do work better if they know what the organization is there to do, what their role can be in it, and it's very clear and very simply expressed for them. So we don't mean a mugs and t-shirts vision. We need practically, what does that mean for me? And it's the difference. We've all heard stories of this, people being stopped in cancer hospitals when they say, oh, you're the cleaner. They go, no, I'm creating a safe environment for people to recover faster. You know, those types of stories. These are where people understand the purpose. We had an example of that with a co-op. Yeah, we could create a digital platform that would just look after us and our ability to sell products, but we're a community-based retailer. So we've got to look after the community. So let's make a digital problem that enables the community to survive better through COVID. Outcomes, not silos. We've talked about that. One of the things that was, again, I think it's post-industrial, that being overly grand about it, is we do like to put ourselves in silos of like-minded people, right? And your silos, whenever we go into a business to do sort of customer experience or journey work, you can just basically start with a, right, you're going to look to make things better for your colleagues and your customers. All the handover points between all the functions will be where it all goes horribly wrong. Yeah, straight out of the box, before you get into finessing it, every time there's a handover point. So this is about saying, if you want to improve your business, you need to have cross-functional collaboration. And arguably, you should go out of the company to your customers and to your supply chain as well. And you should collaborate. And that's what you should do. And when people say to us, how do I encourage better collaboration cross-functionally? You go, get people from different functions into a room and start them collaborating on stuff. And some of it really is no more magic than that. We've been to companies where they say they're focused on collaboration, but they mean within the silo. So they'll get the IT team together to collaborate on a function. They'll get the sales team to collaborate on it. And you go, no, we meant one from each or two from each. And that's what creates the galvanizing change. We got a brilliant example of that, some work we did for a power company in Hungary. And we said, look, we want the engineer in the room. How we managed to run a workshop in Hungary, by the way, I can't speak Hungarian, but it went well. The engineer just very much straight out of the box. Then we're talking about how they do it. They went, no, we put 2 meters in. They went, you can't put 2 meters in. The process is to put 1 in. And he looked at his colleague and he went, between us, we fitted 80% of the meters to all the solar capacity in Hungary. We always put 2 meters in. They didn't know that. It's a €300 saving straight away. That was the entire saving they were looking for out of the journey. So and that's a really simple example of, well, having the smart people. They'd had workshops on it before about why they were spending more money. Managers who coach, and this is a really interesting one, this one. So it's can we get in our heads, our job is to enable these people to do the work we want them to do, rather than tell them what we want them to do. And that's and all that comes back to is you can have a sort of a bigger multiplying effect if you can get into coaching colleagues to deliver things than you can telling people to deliver things. Because the telling version comes back to a sort of war of wills and your ability to actually exert control over people and the frameworks you put around them. And at some point, they're all bleeding some level of productivity off to do that. So coaching versus management style. And it doesn't necessarily mean being like really woolly and nice, but it means, can I improve your ability to do the outcome I'm giving you to do? Because that will make my life easier, versus I'm just going to tell you what I need by when, and I'll come back and remind you, and then I'll give you a kicking if you didn't do it for me. That's a big change. And a lot of companies are trying to embrace this more coaching type mentality to it. Involve all stakeholders. And by that, we mean if you are trying to deliver a significant problem or conquest a significant opportunity, then it's better to have everybody in the room, if you can, at some point, to have a discussion about that, even if they break out and come back, and whether that be inside or outside of the company. And we do realise within that there are issues of stakeholder management in organisations. We've all got stories of leaders who are lunatics and things like that. I've probably been one at one point in time or whatever, but it genuinely works out better if you can get some level of getting as many stakeholders in a room as possible to start looking at a problem. I'm going to share one thing, which I think is quite interesting as an observation, is the research that's been done so far on working from home has come to this following conclusion. Whilst you can implement solutions, you can deliver change, and you can get things done in a remote working sense, to really get under the skin of a complicated, big problem, you need people in a room together to do it. So at some point, you need to come back and collaborate on it physically. There's something about the interplay humans have that cannot be translated into a remote working environment effectively. And that was some peer research done by one of the world's largest petrochemical companies that was run through all of that. And they just came out and went, yeah, if it's really difficult, then at some point we need to be in a room about this, because otherwise we're not going to get to the solution. Execute the solution, do that afterwards. Those people can do that remotely. But creating the solution, we need to be together. So for the nutty stuff, we need to be in a room together. The other thing it said, by the way, and I've already exceeded this, is attention span in Zoom meetings, 15 to 25 minutes max, by the way, apparently. Productive attention time. So doesn't mean all consecutive, but you'll only be present for 15 to 20 minutes. Is there anything on that before I move on? Because I'm aware I have speeded my language up here. So
just really quickly on this, Simon. The connectivity to your customers is more important than ever before. We 60% of what we develop and release on a monthly basis is customer led. That's the level of connectivity we have to have with our customers. And we have customer success people that just talk to customers all day, every day. But the other thing here, which is quite important, is certainly within the software industry, we have a mantra internally that basically we make our own product redundant every 6 months.
Yeah.
So 6 months from today, you look back at our product and you'd go, no, I'd never go back to that. Yeah. Now, if you think about that in terms of acceleration and other business models, other businesses have been doing the same thing for multiple decades without changing any part of what their business does or doesn't do. So these feedback loops are all about, are we heading in the right direction? And, invariably there are going to be some mistakes. Invariably, you're going to have to take a step back at some point. But ultimately, it's around looking at the business and getting to the point where you can see continual improvement on a frequent basis. From the organizations that you've worked with that have adopted this, they've seen significant impact, I'm going to guess, but within sort of a time frame. How long do you think it takes to ingrain this into a business?
I mean, ingrained, that's a very big get me another cup of coffee type conversation. And to start delivering the changes, I mean, we've used this to deliver, if people understand that OPEX is what's my operating cost of a business. So what's the difference between my input and my output? We've seen this deliver 15 to 38% cuts in OPEX and do it in periods of 4 to 9 months. And some of those changes can be quite dramatic and quite quick. Because oddly, when you get into this is how people prefer to work. It's usually the senior management team that don't necessarily get bonded to this. I apologise if we've got any senior managers on the call, by the way, but they're usually the one, and that's because that's a weird, or the director, the C-suite. This type of change can deliver change quite quickly if you point it at specific things or a big enough challenging problem. So what I would say is, if the problem's significant enough, the uptake of this will be quick enough that you can deliver quite a significant change. If you put it into a steady state organization with no burning platform, then quite often these types of things sort of ebb away. We'll get done for initiative and then they'll disappear again. And that's a really interesting one as to, can we use COVID to unlearn the way we used to manage and relearn this way of working? And I think that's a really interesting question. We've got a gap here. I do think the swing back to how we used to be will be more severe than people think it will be, by the way, even though I preface this with it's been here for a long time. Because the area that probably wants the most to go back to how it was is the famous C-suite, who like their offices and the cars and be able to go in and point at people. And they probably will start trying to pull it back in a certain way, except for certain sectors like the one that you're sat in. Ollie, we did speak to a tech company and they went, no, everybody's already saying they want to be back in the office. They just don't want to be back in the office all the time. Why is that? Because they like playing Dungeons and Dragons after work. All right, okay. But I do, to answer your question, these types of approaches are capable of delivering significant change quickly if they're pointed at a clear problem or have got a burning platform stuck behind them. Can they, in of themselves, deliver cultural change? It'd be interesting for somebody like Ruth to view on this one. This is a sort of bottom-up type approach that needs to meet a top-down type approach coming the other way. If you've got a leader that doesn't believe in this, and there was another slide in here that talked about some of that, the shadow of the leader concept, I mean, then, this at best will deliver our result, but it will be marginalised significantly by having a leadership team. We go, yeah, but don't go and talk to IT over there. We'll keep that to ourselves over here and we'll get it sorted out. Don't worry about it. By the way, give me your report by 6 o'clock or I'll fire you. It's always up against those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any thoughts, Ruth? You're off.
No, it's really interesting, Simon. I think that we talk a lot about building that two-way trust, and it's the top-down leadership and the coaching type of element that you've talked about, and also the bottom-up, from the teams. And we look at a lot around the shared vision of smart working. Smart working only works when you've got a shared vision of what it's supposed to look like and you're working to outcomes. I think the thing that I just mentioned is that what we're seeing at the moment is enforced remote working. This is not working smarter. And I totally concur with what you said about we need that collaboration. We've had to step up to the plate as leaders and make the best of it over the past few months. And a lot of leaders have done very well. Some leaders have not done well at all. And we're seeing almost a sense of virtual presenteeism with some of the organisations we work with. But, I think once we do get to a point where we can get back together a little bit, it'd be lovely, and we can get back into collaborating, but we don't need to be with one another all of the time. That's what we've learned, I think, in general.
Absolutely.
And just to add to the purpose-driven approach for an organization, there's been multiple studies over a few years that have shown that really helps cement the team, the culture, and the mentality. So I'm going to drop a piece into the chat that was on LinkedIn yesterday, just for people to read. And this is somebody, so my former CEO taking up the position as CEO of Intel. And it was the letter that he sent to the team on day one. And I'm just going to put it out there that this is somebody that respects a purpose-driven organisation, but also has implemented many of these policies inside an organisation of 40,000 people for 5-6 years. So has already gone through a lot of these processes. So it's worth just looking at those sort of insights when you're making your own decisions. But I'll drop it in the chat.
Thanks, Ollie. And can we go to Alistair? Because he's just put a comment in. I found using the phone as a real benefit. Alistair, do you want to just unmute and tell us your experience?
It's very, very important to maintain that two-way contact with people, whether it's your staff or customers or clients. And oh, can you hear me? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. It's yeah, you know, we try to replicate so much virtually, and it's as we've been discussing, it's very, very difficult to do that in every context. But there are people, and as someone put on the chat, some of the introverts are more come out more openly when on a virtual environment. So there are very different experiences for so many people. But you know, the phone has been less used, shall we say, for so long, because we've got this wonderful new ways of communicating with people. But I've started again. I started my business on the phone, an international property consultancy, and it was all done on the phone, even when it was so expensive to call. It was the only way to do things, and I've come back to it again. Exactly the same communication with people. You can pick up so much of the nuance from a customer, how they're feeling, which you can't get on an email. No. And the same with with people that you're working with. There are nuances there you don't ever experience on a virtual Zoom call, for example.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Thank you, Alistair. And Sue Farrow, you mentioned it was lovely what you wrote when Simon was talking about the community-led stuff. There's stuff happening nearby you that you mentioned.
That's right, Ruth. Yes, you know, I was noticed that everybody was on Amazon, you know, myself included. What can we get? We can get it from Amazon. But of late, I can see more and more local businesses now starting to pivot what they do. And our local pub has now opened a farm shop. And if I drive past there, I can see, you know, really long socially distanced queue of people going to support the local business and to keep the pub running. And, you know, in our community, I get a sense of people wanting to support those that are having to pivot, because we know that when we finally come out of this, we'll need that. And it's really built a sense of community, I think. Before, when everybody was going to work, you know, I used to drive 72 miles round trip a day. We didn't really know our neighbours as well, but I think that's one of the positives, is that you now understand, you know, who in your community has got small businesses. And you know, that's the positive of it. I mean, it has been horrendous, obviously, from a health perspective, but there's been a lot of things, I think, that won't go back. And we're seeing that with housing as well. People are now looking for houses that have got good access to green fields and stuff like that. So I think that the genie's out the bottle, and the businesses that do well are those that recognise it and start to adapt what they're doing. And I think that, you know, working in local hubs, that's an opportunity as well. You know, people want to be able to interact with others, but they don't want to do the commute. So I think that's another chance for another business to sprout up and start to open up a local hub, so that people can do a bit of home working and working with others physically.
Yeah. Excellent. We're coming up to time, Ollie, but I noticed that Les had put something into chat. Les, are you there? You made a comment about what Simon was talking about was really about having that open mindset. Are you there, Les?
Yes, I'm here. I'm being received.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you just want to tell us what you
yeah.
were thinking of?
Well, it was, I mean, as you say, it's sort of the dinosaurs, the old way, very much a closed mindset of people and not being open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. And that then plays through into the sort of the infinite game, you know, where we're not trying to get to a defined end, we're trying to keep going. You know, it's not the finite game, like a game of football where 90 minutes and it's all over. All businesses need to be there, ideally, should be their aim to keep in perpetuity. So they're in an infinite game. So they've got to keep thinking and keep moving and be agile and be open.
Yeah, absolutely. Sparked a lot of thoughts, I think, Ollie and Simon, haven't you?
Hopefully. So, and I am aware we're at time. I don't actually like to run over time, so I'm just leaving these as a sort of insights. Will these be distributed afterwards, by the way, Ollie?
They will, along with the recording, and also, more importantly, a way for people to reach out to get in contact to learn more.
Yeah,
absolutely. Really appreciate it. It's a subject that's close to heart, and I always like something that I've got passion in, and this is exactly one of those things. It was lovely to meet you as well, Simon. So really do appreciate your time and effort putting these slides together and bringing up a lot of those thought-provoking, you know, elements of what businesses should be looking at today. In terms of, if you could paraphrase a takeaway is probably, you know, to introvertively or introspectively look at your organization and try and understand how you can improve the connectivity moving forwards. But also, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, right?
Absolutely. So I think for me, there's an interesting technique we use for people that's going to look at a business is to third person it. So step outside your business and look at it critically and say, has it responded as well as it could have done to the opportunity that COVID has created for it? And that might sound like a tough question, but that's a quite interesting way of doing it. And third personing is a really interesting way of opening your eyes to stuff that you, if you're doing it from this sense of self out, you will not face and you will not look. And those things that have been talked around, humanizing locality and diversity, these are all the big things that I think COVID's opened. It's given us that ability to take global things and act locally. It's made us want to have a more human aspect to it. And it enables us to be more diverse in our thinking. But I think third personing, whatever the thing is you're looking at, as if you have been giving it as a problem to solve by somebody, is a really good way of helping you get to the things that you want to unlearn and relearn in new ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Ruth, thank you very much for setting this up, as always. Appreciate it.
Oh, that's fine. And I'm just, Simon, just from your perspective, loads of respect in the chat for you. So great. People have really.
I can't see the chats. There's a bit. So try and keep the screen available, because I have completely lost Zoom once when I tried to do this. But anyway,
don't worry. I'll try and save the chat for you. So
just as a final takeaway before I hand over to John, I sent my team and a lot of close friends an email the other day saying, I do still have one of these. We don't need to schedule a conversation.
Yeah.
Pick it up if you need anything. Because I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but the whole idea of being able to just pick up the phone to somebody seems to have died. And everything seems to be scheduled now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very sage point. And to Alistair's point, to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. John, over to you. Are you there, John?
I am.
yeah.
The wrong buttons.
So yeah, just to close out, there are a number of other sessions scheduled, which I know we've got the local business champions next week as well. I believe Sadie's starting a marketing series pretty soon. So is there anything else anyone needs to know before wrapping up today, John? Oh.
No, well, it's been a really interesting session, and thank you very much, Simon. Really, I think given us a lot to think about, and you know, it's really key for all of us to think about, obviously, how we can develop and change, and particularly look at how we can make sure that we, as it were, don't go back to the way we were, but take advantage of what's happened to really look at how we can drive it forward. And as many of you may know, I'm stepping down from my role in the chamber, and partly this is the reason in terms of the fact that we are pivoting, we are looking at different things, and it just seemed to me the right time, therefore, to hand over the baton to someone new to be able to continue and develop that change so that we can make sure that we take advantage of the different ways that we've got to develop and operate for the future. So it's something that I'll still be around in a number of different ways, but letting someone else take on where we've managed to get to and really innovate and take it on forward, and let's not lose the opportunity to really gain from what's happened over the last 12 months.
Thank you, John. And I'd personally like to thank the Chamber for setting these sessions up and pivoting as quickly as you guys did with COVID, moving away from face-to-face events to virtual events. And yeah, it's been a very thought-provoking year, but also at the same time, I've learned a lot through these sessions as well. So yeah, it's very valuable from my perspective, and hopefully everyone on the call would mirror that as well. But on that basis, we'll circulate the recording. The presentation will also be in an email distributed along with Simon's contact details. Thank you. And again, Simon, thank you again, Ruth. Thank you, John. Have a fantastic day.
You
Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. See you soon.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.